I have a book here somewhere. Tribes, Seth Godin. I read this book for the first time when I was in college, like 2013, maybe 2014. And it came out a little earlier. It came out in 2008, and the message of tribes was pretty prescient then. But I'd argue it's still just as important today. The message of the book is that there's a lot of stuck organizations and ideas today. To break out of this cycle, a heretic needs to start a movement, activate people, and step up to lead. It's a pretty simple process to become a heretic. You just need to identify a cause you're passionate about, assemble a tribe, and then work to overturn the status quo. The good news about tribes is that the internet has made it easier than ever to lead a tribe. First off, let's get into why tribes. Why did I read Tribes? Like I mentioned, I read Tribes about a decade ago, after I want to say the Tim Ferriss show recommended checking it out. That was my first reading of the book. So in revisiting it though, I thought it might be a good time to come back to Tribes because I'm launching, along with some buddies of mine, Guys Can Read, or we're on a mission to be the largest book club for men in the United States. And promote the discussion and discovery of new books and great ideas. So I'm in the middle of this experiment, right? Where it's like, okay, let's see how this thing works. Let's start a tribe. Let's get guys who are passionate about reading, but maybe don't have an outlet to talk about books, or help others identify and talk about the books that they care about. So that's why we're starting Guys Can Read. And I wanted to pour a little bit of like fuel on the fire in an entrepreneurial sense. Do something where, do something to kind of like get the juices flowing, inspire me, just like kind of light a fire under my butt a little more as I'm getting started on this. And the book did just that. It was really good for that. So, by the way, if you've got other books that you turn to for some kind of entrepreneurial adventure, starting a new business, whatever, please send them my way in the YouTube comments or over DMs on Instagram. We are at guys_can_read. I'll stop here for a quick interlude and pitch. Speaking of Guys Can Read, we are currently in the middle of our January book of the month, which is Billionaire Wilderness by Justin Farrell. Our goal... The reading of books and obviously the discovery of new books is super important, but we're really passionate about the discussion of books too. So every month, Guys Can Read will choose a new book, and we will be reading that together and joining up again for discussion of that book in about a month's time. So the first book that we're doing in January 24 is Billionaire Wilderness by Justin Farrell. If you're in the Seattle area community, we're going to be meeting up to discuss that book live in person on the week of February 11th, I believe. Check out Instagram to keep me honest on that. But if you want to join us for that discussion and you're in the Seattle area, please read the book, and please do. We'd love to have you there. But if not, even if you're virtual, give us a follow on Instagram. There will be more steps coming soon for how you can start up a local chapter of Guys Can Read or join us for discussion virtually. So once again, the name of that book, though, Billionaire Wilderness, Justin Farrell. So it's probably best to start with one of these, this passage from one of the earlier chapters. And the chapter literally begins with, "Here's my thesis." So first off, for the first time ever, everybody in an org, not just the boss, is expected to be a leader in some way, shape, or form. Second, the very structure of the modern workplace means it's easier to change things, and individuals have more leverage than ever. He doesn't really unpack that, but let's take him at face value for the time being. Third, the marketplace rewards organizations and individuals who change things and create remarkable products and services. He kind of expands on that in the next bullet point, actually. He says it's engaging, it's thrilling, it's profitable, it's fun. When he says the marketplace rewards you, the marketplace rewards you monetarily if you are creating a remarkable product and service. And then the last bullet point he'll make in this thesis statement is there's a tribe of fellow employees, customers, investors, believers, hobbyists, or readers just waiting for you to connect them to one another and lead them where they want to go. As far as the thesis go, Godin repeats this a lot throughout the book in different iterations, which I would say is one of the pitfalls actually of the book. More on that later. But it doesn't take long to absorb the idea, namely that you should either go, build, or connect with your tribe today. It's a cool message, for sure. It's very empowering. It's a little kick in the butt that a lot of people, including me and probably you, should absorb in order to go do cool stuff. So, as far as content goes, too, the majority of the book is broken into these short chapters. They can range anywhere from like 1 to 3 pages in length. And most of the chapters I'd categorize safely as either examples of people who are leading tribes and executing on movements, or like the philosophy of tribes, basically, like, okay, what are the fundamental building blocks? Like, how do you start a movement? What should you be measuring? He'll get into that in like the philosophy chapters, which are interspersed kind of throughout with these examples. He toggles a lot back and forth between those two. Some of my favorite chapters in this book, if you can call them that, include, first off, 3 ways to improve a tribe, which are transforming shared interest into a passionate goal, desire for change. The second way is providing tools to allow members of the tribe to tighten their communication. And Godin actually argues this is the most important one, giving your members a way to engage with each other rather than you. And then the third way to improve a tribe is to leverage tribes to allow for growth and gaining new members. So those are the 3 ways to improve a tribe. Another one of my favorite chapters, he goes into this like soliloquy on what he calls sheep walking, which is basically just like anybody who's been raised to kind of obey the status quo and do the same thing and keep on the same path that they've been on. He comes across as a little harsh, and he even acknowledges that himself. He also talks a little bit in sheep walking about like the biggest step, as opposed to like individuals choosing not to be sheep walkers. He says the biggest step comes from anybody who's teaching or hiring. And in those situations, it's actually best to embrace like non-sheep behavior. That's his word, not mine. And then to reward it and cherish it, which is cool because I think all of us like have the opportunity, even if you're with a group of friends and you're talking about what to do on a Friday night, it's like, okay, like the sheep behavior is like, oh, let's go to the same old bar. Let's, go to happy hour and then we'll say our goodbyes a couple hours later. But like non-sheep behavior, you can do a lot of cool stuff within that. So if your friends are like speaking up and have crazy ideas about like, hey, we should shake stuff up today, that's like non-sheep behavior. And you can reward that in your personal life as well as your professional life, in my opinion. Another one of my favorite tribes, and actually the last one I'll cite here, he kind of goes through a cookbook of how to create a tribe. Technically the chapter is called, I think, How to Create a Micro Movement, but what are movements if not just things that started as micro movements? So his 5 to-dos to create a tribe. First off, publish a manifesto. Second, make it easier for your followers to connect with you. 3, make it easy for your followers to connect with one another, kind of intermixing. 4, realize that money isn't the point of a movement. I think this is important. He doesn't spend a ton of time talking about it, but like great movements rarely start as being like money motivated. They often end up creating a lot of money for the people involved, but a lot of good movements are not money motivated. And then 5, track your progress. This is something I'm personally really passionate about. The idea of like, I don't know, go read Measure What Matters by John Doerr. I'll hyperlink to that or something in the show notes. Are these show notes? I don't really know. But this idea of track your progress, like keep an eye on like what metrics matter, what you want to pay attention to, and then how you're attaining against those incrementally over time. I'm a big fan of that, and that's what he says is the 5th thing to do to start a micro movement. And he has some principles here for kind of running your micro movement as well. First off, transparency is really your only option. You have to be organic in yourself and straightforward with your followers and members of the tribe. Second, your movement needs to be bigger than you. This involves putting aside your ego a little bit. I'm sure it's something I'll hash out at some point. Not that my ego is particularly big to begin with, but if I'm talking about my own ego right now, it kind of is, right? Not to get too meta on you. The third one, movements that grow thrive. So bring in more people. The 4th is movements are most clear when compared to the status quo or to movements that work to push in the other direction. This is kind of a marketing thing. Your movement should basically, like, what he's talking about here is like juxtaposition, right? Like you need to have all good creation myths have a devil. I think I'm quoting The Social Network there, but could be something else too. The like your movement should speak to or speak out against either the status quo or against a movement that's working in the other direction. Like if my movement is to get people to read more books, then I guess the counter movement would be like, I don't know, play more video games, watch more TV. Or I guess my movement's really about like, go talk to people about things, like join something and regularly discuss it with people. So I don't know, the opposite of that is like stay in and watch Netflix. The fifth principle of the micro movement, exclude outsiders. And this is kind of an interesting one. But people are actually like really fired up about exclusion. They're like, oh yeah, we are part of this cool thing and there's other people who are not. But he actually like kind of caveats that with the next point and final point, which is tearing others down is never as helpful to a movement as building your followers up. So don't tear down the people on the outside, but make it clear to your followers and others that your micro movement is important, and there are people on the inside, people who are passionate and excited and part of the thing, and then there are the people who are not. So exclude outsiders, but then don't tear others down at the same time. That concludes kind of like, I don't know, my perspective on the content, and should give you a couple ideas for what you can find within this book. Okay, next up, writing style. Let's get to my biggest beef with Tribes by Seth Godin. Some of the observations I've made so far, Godin bounces around a lot between examples and philosophy frequently in this book. He'll occasionally pick up a linear thread over the course of a couple chapters, but he'll switch to a different topic before long. The chapters are short and don't really come in a particular order over the course of the book. Other than I'd say the intro, which sort of loosely establishes the premise of tribes, movements, leaders, etc. The topic is, of course, tribes, but there's also a lot of oscillation within that. I think half of the people reading this will see this as a marketing book. Another half of them will view it as a leadership book. I would probably put it somewhere in between, maybe even in the realm of like sociology. Like people are excited to be part of these movements. You just need to capitalize on that. So that's sort of, I don't know, how I view the writing style of this. It's sort of a little all over the place, and there's a little bit of everything for everybody, but I wouldn't say it's like a cohesive theory from start to finish. Honestly, for anybody who was brought up in the Christian church, you might see parallels between Tribes and a book of devotionals. For anybody who didn't grow up in the church, this is like something that you open every day to get like a Bible verse and then a idea about like, oh, what you should do with this, or how you should integrate this into your life. Tribes is kind of like that. Like every chapter is pretty short, self-contained, to an extent. And you could almost like read this book every day and get a different idea out of it, which I thought was really funny. It may almost work better that way than reading through Tribes in like one or two sittings, which I did. And then, Godin, to his credit, is like self-aware about this. He says at one point, this book won't appeal to everybody, or at least something to the gist of that, which I appreciate. But if you're considering reading this book, it is something important to keep in mind. Like this book isn't really going to hit for everybody because of this narrative structure and the way that he bounces around ideas. Let's conclude with, should you read Tribes? Personally, I gave this book 4 stars on Goodreads. I think it's a super important message for everybody. I think it's really easy to be passive, and there's a lot of like kind of doom and gloom in 2024 and recent years where it's like, oh yeah, nothing's going to change, whatever. It's like, no, things can change, and they do change. Sometimes all it takes is one person to start the movement, and that's why I think this message is so important. Is I hope for some of you who end up reading this book, it's a catalyst to go start a tribe, or join a movement if you don't want to lead a movement, and like get in the mix with something that you care about. And there's a bunch of tribes for basically everything out there. And I might go into some of my favorites in a follow-up video, but like everybody should read a tribe, and this is a really important message that everybody should hear. If you're working for a company, this will inspire you to step up and be a heretic inside your own company. If you're considering launching your own venture, this will inspire you to take the plunge like it did me. However, if you're looking for like a flash out business book with like concepts, examples, exhibit A, topic, like kind of organized and structured, I might recommend checking something else out. I don't think Tribes is the book for you. I would maybe a couple of my favorite business books just off the top. Both of them are memoir style. That I've read recently are Ride of a Lifetime by Bob Iger and Creativity Inc. by Ed Catmull. Solid narrative flow, good business ideas embedded throughout. But at the end of the day, if you're looking to shake up your work life a little bit or want to read something about how change happens, Tribes is a really great place to start. There's a great quote from Godin in here: "We spend far too much time at work for you to be passive in it," and I couldn't agree more. So that's Tribes by Seth Godin. Thanks for listening, and please like this video, subscribe to the channel for more Guys Can Read book reports, and we'll see you next time.